Hello, everybody, and welcome. My name is Fred Phelps, and I have the pleasure of moderating today's presentation. This presentation is a collaboration between CSW and the International Social Service Canada, and we're excited to be partnering with them so that social workers can learn more about their work and how they can support your practice. Before introducing our speaker, I will just quickly go over some housekeeping. Today's presentation will be approximately 45 minutes, followed by a question and answer period that I will moderate. I encourage you to type in your questions at any time during the presentation, and I'll begin asking them at the end of the presentation. All the information you need to know about how to rewatch this webinar, how to access a certificate of attendance, and how to download the slide deck are covered in the housekeeping widget that popped up when you first logged on. With that said, it's now my honor to introduce our speaker for today. Sylvie Lapointe is the Director of Services at ISS Canada and is among the most experienced and respected international social workers in the ISS Global Network. She has been working for ISS Canada for over 16 years. As a social worker herself, Sylvie's passion for her profession is evident in the quality of work she offers to social workers across Canada and around the world. Sylvie coordinates caseworks between Canadian agencies and ministries and more than 120 countries that make up the ISS Global Network. Intercountry adoptions, child welfare, and intercountry kinship placement have been constant issues in her casework. Sylvie is familiar with the practices and policies in most Canadian provinces, as well as the laws and cultural factors that influence social work in other countries. She has had an interesting and accomplished career, so I do encourage you to read her full bio on the right of your screen. So with that said, I will now turn it over to our speaker, and I'm very, very happy to have Sylvie with us. So Sylvie, take it away.
Thank you, Fred. Bonjour, everyone. Nice to see such a big group joining us today, so thank you for that. That's a compliment to both our agencies, Fred and I. So nice to have you all here. So this is just a little outlook of what our presentation could look like today. So I'll give you a little bit of a history of who I am. I won't make it very long. We won't go into the nitty-gritty. I will talk about the ISS network because, as Fred said, we are a network of 120 countries out there doing social work. So I think it's important that you know about a little bit about the history and who we are. I do want to introduce a little bit about our General Secretariat. Then we'll get into the fun part of ISS Canada because I know that's why you're here, to learn more about the Canadian services that we have. We'll talk about some added values. We'll go through case examples. And like Fred said, we'll have questions, comments, and discussions. The case examples, I would tell you, will be your favorite part. That's why I keep them for the end. And that's where actually during the case examples you will actually get to really understand how ISS works and what we're all about. So if I don't make sense in the first part and you're saying, what is this? Bear with me, and the case examples will bring everything together because they are actual case examples that we have done from Canada a few years ago. So they're not too, but they are very common to what we see here every day. So the first part about who I am, so Fred read out the bio, but as you can tell from my name, Sylvie Lapointe, I am a French-Canadian, French-Ontarian, Franco-Ontarienne. So if sometimes during my presentations, I'm looking for my words, you just bear with me. English is my second language, so I like to always say that so people don't think that I'm not well educated. So I completed a master's at the University of Ottawa. I was part of the second cohort. I'm proud to say that because it was a French program that had just been developed. So being the second cohort, we were sort of the pioneers of the whole program. And after that schooling, I went and did some child protection work in Northern Ontario. It's not really northern. The people from Northern Ontario would say it was more western. I just went a little bit to North Bay where I got my child welfare experience. And then family circumstances brought me back to Ottawa where I answered a tiny little ad in the newspaper requesting a bilingual social worker with a master's degree. And the rest is history. I've been with ISS for 16 years, and to this day I can tell you that at my job I learn something every day, and that's the exciting part, definitely. So the ISS-Network so International Social Service, I know it sounds a lot like other acronyms out there, but it's International Social Service. We have a General Secretariat in Geneva, Switzerland, where a lot of the NGOs are actually located, so it's just handy for meetings and advocacy work to be done and so on for them to have an office there. But we actually partner with over 120 partners, or we call them members, throughout the world. So ISS Canada actually has an office here in Ottawa. So I'm coming to you live from Ottawa, and we do cover all of Canada. So a lot of people, one of their questions will be, well, is there an ISS Canada in Montreal, Toronto, British Columbia? And the answer is unfortunately not. It's only one small office in Ottawa providing this great service. So this is what it looks like. But on any given day, of course, the 120 countries that we can access could change. But this is on an average day what it could look like. As you can imagine, because of different political situations in different countries, or as I like to call her, Mother Nature, other things might prevent our services from happening. As for an example, I remember vividly when there was the tsunami in Japan, there was an email out to the whole membership of ISS saying we will have to put our services on hold for at least the next 6 months as we are rebuilding our country. So at any given time, if a worker would have called me at that time from Canada saying, I really need a family assessed in Japan, we would have had to refuse the service because Mother Nature had decided otherwise. And because of conflict and so on, we can't always guarantee that the services would be available, but this is, can I say, grossly what we look like on any given day. So the history of the ISS is actually very interesting, so I like to mention it. It actually started after the First World War, so 1924, and it's actually a group of, it's actually two groups of women that started the initial ISS. So there was a group of women in New York and a group of women over in Europe. I forget exactly where, I think it was France. And through their communication, because they were linked by a church organization, they decided that so many family members had been displaced because of the war. Either you had children that had been sent over to family members to avoid, getting hurt during the conflict, or you had soldiers that, had been displaced. The group of women decided to reunify these families after the First World War. So that's how ISS actually originated. Of course, we've grown from that, but it's always nice to see how far back we go. We are, pretty close to celebrating 100 years, and that's no small thing for us. And so, just so you know, also we, people will say, well, international social work. A lot of people think it's about providing aid to other countries, or actually a worker going overseas and doing some social work. But ISS is about social workers in different countries working together for a solution for families. And we draw upon, our work is guided by different conventions and conferences related to children and families. So I can tell you that on any given day, if you're doing some work with us, you will hear us talk about, the rights of the child, because often we will refer to these rights of the child to guide our work. I can tell you that right now I have some cases where I'm actually, trying to work with another country, a Dominican Republic, because there's a child that was sent over from Canada, and I think that some of his rights were forgotten. So that's, in this case, the convention guides me to say, Canada's a signatory, so is the Dominican Republic. What can we do to make sure that this child's rights are being honored, and so on and so forth. And of course, we work with the Hague conferences. There's three of them. So on adoption, on child protection, which Canada has not signed yet, and wrongful retention or abduction, as you can call it. So I would encourage any of you out there that are not familiar with the Hague conferences to actually go out and read them. That's one big piece that was missing for me when I first started as a social worker, because if you get into anything international, it's always nice to know a little bit more about the Hague conferences. So here I am giving you homework in quotation marks. So I wanted to discuss a little bit about the ISS General Secretariat that I earlier mentioned that is in Geneva, because some of their divisions might be interesting to some of you out there. So there's actually 16 units at the General Secretariat, but I won't mention them all. I'll mention just a few that are of interest possibly to some of you, and definitely some of them that are of more interest to me. So the first is the casework division. So in the good old days when they first started in 1924 and beyond, actually there was the hub, the whole casework division of ISS, all the cases went through them. So even though I had a case with the USA, let's say, all the cases would have gone from Canada to Geneva for Geneva to send over to the US and for them to do the work and so on. So it was a big casework division. Nowadays, you can imagine how we've grown, how with technology and so on, casework division now has become the central coordination point for members of the ISS network. So they do the accreditation and keeping, just the list up to date as who we're coordinating with and so on and so forth. So their role has become not as big, but so important to me, because I can almost tell you that almost every day I'd be asking the casework division, especially with its different countries, or especially if it's countries where I know that there's some turmoil or possibly, like I mentioned, Mother Nature intervened. I want to make sure I'm updated with my countries. Just like right now, I just received somebody from an agency who's asking me for a service in Ghana. Well, I had to go and make sure that we will be able to offer that service for me to go forward with that client. There's the International Reference Center. So anybody out there that is listening right now, any of you that are mostly working in adoption or child protection, the International Reference Center is the place to go. For over 25 years, they have been doing research specifically related to the rights of children that are deprived of family. So that would include foster care, adoption, children that are displaced, and things like that. So they have grown their archives to, you would not believe the amount of information is in there about country situations, about best practices, so on and so forth. And when people work with us and they have specific questions about different countries or different situations, I can actually access the IRC. And different central authorities working on adoptions throughout the country actually pay in to be members of the IRC so that they can access this specific information. So if you're interested in that, we can have a discussion, or you can contact me at one point. The mediation unit is the newer of the units, I can say, but I wanted to mention it because it's become very interesting to a lot of people who are also working in abduction cases or in marital conflict, especially when it has to do with custody, and when it has to do with marriages breaking down and their parents are not living in the same country. So mediation is, they've gathered the information on mediators that are available in 60 different countries, Canada being one of them, of course, and in our different provinces. So on any given time, I can contact the mediation unit and say, okay, so some clients are interested in mediation with this in this country. This is the language that would be spoken. There are cultural aspects that we need to consider. They have the whole list of who would be the best mediator to work on this case. So it's become very, very interesting, and I'm glad ISS took that lead in putting this unit together, because I think it's going to be something that's going to be growing. And then the Special Projects Unit, one of the projects that they are working on is A Better Future is Possible, and the reason why I mention it is because I was actually part of A Better Future is Possible project in Mauritius. So I was able to go twice to Mauritius and work with the local governments and agencies over there to better service the children that are currently in institutions not finding homes for them. So I won't elaborate on the project, but this Special Projects Unit actually has this Better Future Possible project on the go with over 5 countries. So it's definitely very interesting. So ISS is not just about casework. You can see it's all about creating archives. It's all about accessing mediators, I should say, and about special projects and helping out in other countries. So numerous things are happening with ISS. I like to show this next slide because before we get into case examples and about specific case, I like to give a visual about what ISS is all about. So the first drawing that you can see is we like to say that we like to protect families, and that's in the broad sense of the word. It doesn't mean it means about protecting not the family unit per se, because sometimes there's nothing we can do about that, but it's about protecting every person that is part of the unit. So again, it's all about, like I mentioned earlier, it's all about the child's rights. But I've also have a lot of cases right now on my desk about parental rights, parents that are denied their accessing their children and so on and so forth. So it's about protecting every person in the unit. And it doesn't have to be necessarily a family, but it can also be individuals. As I mentioned, we're big into the mediating. You can imagine how many people are traveling right now, marrying people from different countries and so on. And unfortunately, when there's breakdowns, it does affect the families. I can actually tell you that I'm not a mediator. I'm not a trained mediator, but I was actually asked a few years ago to help assist in completing a divorce that was happening between Switzerland and somebody in a Canadian province. So it was not about being the lawyer. It was not about being providing legal assistance or anything like that. It was about mediating. So me being her support while she was going through this divorce, and it was about making sure that her rights were not being infringed in any way. It was a kind of a clear-cut situation, but it was still about providing the mediation. So, and she knew what she was getting into, that I was not a lawyer or a mediator, but I still assisted in that way, and it was actually, if I can say, quotation, it was successful. We like to say that we support families, whatever they are going through. Again, in my case examples, you will see how ISS can support families or individual members of the family unit or individual members. And we also like to say, like from our origin, is about reuniting. I don't have this specific case example in my case later on, but I can tell you that we've assisted in reuniting a refugee that came from Africa, made her way through Europe, ended up in Russia, and eventually landed in Saskatchewan, and we were able to reunite her with 2 twins she had lost along the way that were now young adults, because, again, we have the partners in other countries, and we were able to locate them. We don't do the private eye part of the investigation, but if we can know which country they would be in, we can access the information and reunite people. And the drawings at the bottom are more about our fields of not necessarily just our expertise, but also up-and-coming subjects that ISS is working on. So the first drawing is about adoptions, and how sometimes, there's going to be a family on one side, and then there's going to be the biological parents maybe on the other. And so we're all about making sure that the adoption are legal and so on and so forth. And that, again, is with the IRC, with all the information that they are gathering. The second drawing is about children on the move, which is not as big here yet in Canada because of I can say our geological place in the world. We don't have as many children on the move as what Europe is seeing right now with Africa. The children are coming up that way. So it's a big thing. But actually, I will be attending an event at Carleton University, and they have chosen children on the move as their topic. So it will be very interesting to see how Canada responds to this growing need of children on the move. Then the other one is, of course, the mediation. You see, people trying to talk amongst the family. The other one is a search for roots, and I actually do have a case illustration on that, but it's all about either children that have been adopted and are looking for biological parents, or even children that are in care and have lost touch with biological families, so the extended family also. So that's why the tree is upside down, because it's all about the roots and the extended family. And the last little image is definitely something that is very interesting to learn about, but it's all about surrogacy. It's a topic that we started talking about, I should say, about 5 years ago, when a colleague from the UK gave us a case illustration of international surrogacy that was happening. So ISS took the position that we're not going to try and say if we think surrogacy should be legal or not, but our position will be about protecting all of the people involved in surrogacy. So how do we provide protection to the woman carrying the baby, the donor of the sperm, the child that will be born from that, the adoptive parents or future parents of that child that will be in this equation. So it's all about us making sure that we want all of these people involved best protected as they can be. Because let me tell you, it gets very difficult and it gets very messy, and we've been learning stuff about surrogacy ever since we started talking about this topic that I never thought were even possible. So science is heading in one direction, and it seems that the human aspect is being forgotten. So it's definitely a subject that's up and coming, and again, we can talk about that aspect later on if you have questions. So now, I'm not going to read it out to you, but I thought you would be interested to know a little bit more about ISS Canada vision and mission, because it's something we worked on and revitalized. We used to have another vision and another mission, but we've just revitalized them about 2 years ago. So they are brand new, but it gives you an idea of what ISS Canada is all about. So maybe you can return to that slide on another time, but I just don't want to read it out to you, but I think it's important that you know what we're about. So in the office here in Ottawa, like I mentioned earlier, on any given day, this is what our day could look like. So we do, if I would have to put a number on it, would be about 90% of our cases will be child welfare or child protection related. And that would include child welfare checks for adoption and foster care. We have grown our data bank of information to, it doesn't include the 120 countries that we keep mentioning, because a lot of the countries don't have such data banks of prior involvement with child protection. But we do have quite a big data bank of how to obtain it and so on and so forth, so it's become one of our expertise. And again, for child protection, kinship assessments for placements, so children that are in care who can or could go to reside with extended family members or family friends to other countries. We provide these assessments. Guardianship, I differentiate guardianship because when it comes to the bio-parent who's residing in the other country, so the child is taken into care here in Canada for reasons X, Y, and Z, but the other bio-parent is overseas or over borders, however you want to mention it, and so we can provide assessments for that. But we like to keep kinship and guardianship on two different pillars. Documentation, I can tell you that we've been successful, and again, not in every country, but at obtaining either birth certificates or even school records for children that are in care now, and so on and so forth. So the list of what kind of documentation we can obtain, it varies from country to country, because some countries are more difficult, but we have had success in quite a few documentation retrieval, if I can call it that. Intercountry adoptions, we don't get involved with as much because there is a central authority established in a lot of countries now. But in countries where the central authority is not involved, we can still play a role in making sure that that some information is being transferred. So in a lot of cases lately, we've been doing. It's an adoption happening overseas. There's no central authority. We've been asked to collect record checks or reference checks, or actually do full interviews with people who are giving their references for adoptions to occur. So we still play smaller roles for international adoption. Deportation, that's definitely something that is very difficult to work with, but we have played a role in assisting when people are being deported to make sure that they are receiving some kind of support on the other side when they have to leave Canada for reasons X, Y, and Z. Again, it will vary on the country that we are working with, but we can definitely try and assist in getting some assistance on the other side. And search for roots, like I said earlier, it's more about post-adoption and even children coming out of care. So after their wardship, how do we reconnect them with possible families? So again, we can have some case examples if you're not too clear on what we can do or can do. So just, I'm looking at the time going by, and I don't think I can go through all of these, but I just wanted to make sure that you understood that some of our best practices for ISS is definitely working in the best interest of the child. I agree it's a very complex term in terms of who determines best interest, and is it a catch-all, really? But really our premise is all about making sure that the best interest of the child is still in the center of our decision making. So when both partners on either side of the ocean, as I like to say, work with that same intention, you'd be surprised how we can better work together when we have the same objective. And before, I want to make sure that everybody understands. So when let's say that agency that called me and said I would like an assessment in Ghana, it's not about me getting on a plane and going over to Ghana and doing the assessment. And this is the main reason why I solely believe in ISS Canada and the work that we do. It's about me helping a worker, let's say from Manitoba, who needs an assessment in Ghana, but not me going over there. It's about us engaging people over in Ghana and making sure that they can assess the families with the right cultural background, with the right language, the right everything. So it's not me with my blinders on, as I like to say, because as a Canadian, even though if I can be as open-minded as I would want to be and I could speak 100 languages if I could, I still could not get an appropriate home study from Ghana, because it's only the local people, the local professionals who can really provide you with a suitable assessment and can cover all the topics. A lot of people think also that because, the U.S., it's so close and we have the no language barriers and so on, and our systems are sort of similar. Well, I guess they're changing more and more, but I wouldn't even send myself to do an assessment in the USA. There would be no way for me to capture everything, all the community supports that I can gather, and the feeling for what the child may be accessing once they are there. So that's why I firmly believe that we need to access our members from overseas to do the great work that they do. And so, again, it is about, local knowledge and a lot of communication. So I'll skip to the next slide because of time constraints. But again, we can have discussions about all of that if you want to later on in your questions. So we're getting to the case examples. So hopefully I've chosen some that are of interest to you. But if, again, during your questions at the end, if you want me to talk about a specific kind of case, I can certainly do that. Or if you want more case examples, ask for more case examples, because I can talk forever about cases. We have very poignant cases that we've worked on and very successful cases, and it's always nice for people to better understand how we work through the case examples. So this case actually came to us from a Children's Aid Society in Ontario, and it was a 13-year-old girl that went to her teacher one day and actually said that she didn't want to go home that night because she was tired of being physically and sexually abused by her father. So the first, I'm sure most of you know how child protection works in Canada. So as you know, the child was taken into care, and we were actually contacted by the Children's Aid Society to say, we would like you to there's a parent in Jamaica, her mom is in Jamaica, and we would need to find her to make sure that she knows that, for our due process, how we need to let her know that we have her child in our care. And so it was difficult to to get all of this done, because with talking with them, the child had left over 5 years ago, and when they first asked her, well, what's your mom's name, and she would say, well, my mom's name is Mom, and where did you live in Jamaica? And her answer was, well, near the White Church. So there was quite a work that needed to be done on the local side to try and get as much information as we could, but we ended up being able to build a case to send over to Jamaica. And amazing as they are, they were able to find this mom who lived next to the White Church and approach her with letting her know that her child was in care in Canada. And the first reaction of the mom was relief. Even though she was sad to hear what had happened, she was relieved because for the last 5 years she had been shut out of her daughter's life. So the father had asked her if he could bring the child over to Canada. She had agreed to it because she thought, better chances for schooling, better chances because it's Canada and it's such a great country. However, once he was in Canada, cut all ties to the mom. So she actually told our colleagues in Jamaica, she said, I kept looking at the big map of Canada and not knowing, where my child was in this big country, and she didn't know how to start looking for her. So she actually asked, I want my child back. So our first intervention, which was supposed to just let mom know and possibly give her with, serve her with court documents, became, well, we need to assess mom to make sure that she would be appropriate to have her child back. And so we worked again with our Jamaican members, and we were able to receive an assessment from mom. The delay in having them reunited was that the child had to stay back to testify against her father at the court. So what we did, which if you ask me in retrospect was sort of a good thing, because what we were able to set up was that it wasn't, this is the era before, well, mom didn't have email, but we did have email back then, but it was not Skype, it was not Facebook. So what we did was we made sure that mom and daughter were talking every week. So it was set up with the foster parent that the child would call her mom every week, and we actually had some physical letters exchanged. So it was a chance for mom and daughter to get reacquainted after all this time, and especially after the trauma that the daughter had lived through. Needed to make sure that before we just sent her over, that mom was more aware of what was going on and that they were rebuilding their relationship. So after the court, and actually the father was found guilty, and he's spending 12 years in jail. I just like to say that as a little à côté. So what we were able to do with our colleagues also in Jamaica was to make sure that there was follow-up. So not just send a child back to Jamaica on a plane and, wash our hands of it, but the CS actually wanted some follow-up. So make sure that she was, being registered back in school, getting the support from the abuse she had gone through, support with mom. So we made sure that we had about monthly visits with the family to make sure that everything was fine. And then when we close when you close our file after 6 months, well, you're sort of, you're content with how things are going and who they've been. They're getting the community supports and so on and so forth. So this is an example of a kinship placement, and it was so a family had just recently immigrated to Canada from China, and 2 or 3 months after they were here, the father committed homicide on the mother, and actually it was in front of the children. So the children had to be placed into care, and in this case we were not contacted because, again, when these things happen, the first thing that had to happen was that the police had to go over and notify the parents of their daughter's death. So the way the case came to us was actually when the police came back to let the police know here in Canada that there was a reaction from the grandparents, and they had to tell the local child protection agency, was that the grandmother had asked, where are my grandchildren? So there was an interest in having them back. What the grandmother had explained was that the family had all resided together before their departure from Canada. So, of course, the Child Protection Agency had to make sure that this was a suitable placement. We are talking about 2 children that were not even school age, so they were quite small. This case will always be of close to my heart, I guess, because the worker in this case was so devoted and so committed to these children. I think she was calling me every second day, if not every day, asking me how is the home study in China going and how are things happening. And the sad part was that she was reporting to me that the children, their mental health was deteriorating as time was going on. So there was a lot of depression, even though they had been placed with a wonderful foster family that was language appropriate and culturally appropriate. The children were just not doing very well. And of course we know why. I mean, they had a lot of trauma, losing both their parents on the same day in a very strange country that they were just getting to know. Must have been horrifying. So kept, bugging my friends over in ISS Hong Kong was how are things going, and they knew we had a timeline and that we wanted to get things done very fast. So the home study came back very positive. The bedroom was still set up for the children because they had just left a few months ago, so everything was so appropriate. So when the grandmother came for her daughter's funeral, she was actually able to bring her grandchildren home back with her. And a few weeks later, the social worker that had been calling me every second day, I actually missed her because we had done such great work together, but she called me and she said, I just received the best thing through email today, and she said the grandmother sent me a picture. So what I'm about to show you is not the actual picture. This is one that was stolen off the internet, but it looked something like this. So it was the two children jumping up and down on grandmother's bed, and the worker and I just commented, of course their life is not going to be easy. There will always be the trauma. There will always be the difficulty of losing both parents, because we don't even know when the father would be back in the picture right at this point, but these children needed to be with their grandparents, and obviously we're doing a lot better at this point in time. So I think it's one of the best thank yous I've ever received. It's going to be tough to beat that one. So I like to share this story because it's a great example of how we were able to get children back to loving family members after a very difficult situation. So this is a case that actually lasted for years and years and years. So it's an abduction case, and we call it wrongful retention maybe. So it was a local police that called me years and years ago, but the children had been taken away to attend a wedding. I'm putting quotation marks in another country. And the father had then let his wife know that he would not be returning the children. And the police officer was calling me because he said, I worked with this and that and that and that agency, and we're not getting anywhere. And he says he remembers clearly me just saying, well, we have nothing to lose. Let me give it a try. So in these types of cases, we don't have the helicopters, like in the movies, grabbing the children and bringing them back, but we have social workers or psychologists or social agencies on the ground doing more mediation or talking through the situation. So in this case, our partner in India was contacted, and I gave her a briefing of what was happening, and she met with the children, their father, and she was able to send me pictures of the children, and the mom had not seen pictures of her children in over 2 years. And it was a short report on how they were doing, and the first report that came back was actually, positive, and they seemed to be doing well. However, there was sort of a PS at the bottom of the page, and it said, but this case is not over. And I thought, what does she mean? Because we were not talking about bringing the children back. I had just promised the police officer I would try to get an update on how the children were doing. So to me, I thought, we've done great. We fulfilled our promise, again, in quotation marks, to the police officer. However, what happened is that the social worker in India continued to want to meet with the family because she felt something was odd, and also wanted to return the children to the mom. She was a firm believer that the children should be with their mother. And she ended up harassing the family members, I'll have to say, because their second report was more about, I called the father, he didn't want to see me, so I called the uncle, he said, he talked to the father, and then I had to call the grandparents, and, until finally they let her in the house again, and they let her interview the children individually. And this is when we learned that, especially the little girl was not happy about the situation. When she later wrote to me further down the line, she actually described her situation as hell, because what she was doing was she was in charge of household chores, and she was missing school, and she wanted to be in school, but she was being held back to help the family in doing chores and so on and so forth. So the mediation from my partner in India was crucial in this case, because the mom actually went back to India, and she was able to get some mediation going with the mom actually live on the ground and with the father. And it took years. Again, this case lasted forever, it seems, but we were eventually able to get the son back to mom after a few months, and then the daughter eventually came back also. He held on to her. Of course, the father held on to her as much as he could, because she was being so, she was a practical aspect, right, in the household. So, but it ended up a positive story that the children are back with their mom, and this is what they wanted. This is how we were able to intervene, because, again, we can't just force, we don't have the, I guess, the legal background, or especially in this case, India had not been a signatory to child abduction, so we were sort of winging it as we went, and more dealing with the social aspect of trying to get this mom some news of her children, but we ended up helping a whole lot more than we thought. So I give big kudos to our partner in India. She was amazing. I like to mention this adoption reunification, because I know people say, oh, there's Facebook and a lot of people are doing things themselves, but this is a few years ago where a gentleman called me from Canada, and he said, apparently maybe you can help me because you have links in other countries. And I said, well, depending on where it is, I can try my best. He said, I know I was adopted, and that my mom actually, I came from Germany. And so what I did is I took in the information, I sent it over to Germany, and the bad news came back, unfortunately, that his mom had just passed away a few years earlier, so his biological mom had passed away. However, my partner's, this is it's in Germany, so my partners in Germany actually found out that through digging, they have access to a lot of files over there. They said that they had found a full brother and a half sister. And so I had to go back to this gentleman and say, I'm sorry, your biological mom is deceased. However, there is a full brother and a half sister, and but you have to give us permission, and you have to let us know if you're interested in knowing them. And his first response to me was, I grew up as an only child. I married an only child, and I don't have children of my own. And all of a sudden, you're telling me like I have a full brother and a half sister. He was thrilled, more than happy, more than words can say. And there was a communication back and forth, but one of the next communication that came back was actually from Germany, where the half-sister insisted on sharing a story with her half-brother, where she said, please let him know that I knew he existed from the get-go. Forever in my life, I knew I had a brother somewhere, because every day on his birthday, my mom would make him a small cake, or we would at least light a candle, on a dessert or something, and wish him a happy birthday. And so because all of this, because everybody had been aware of his existence, it was easy to discuss what would be the next steps, because in some cases of like this, we have to tread light, slowly, and make sure that everybody's comfortable with what's happening. But in this case, everybody was just thrilled, except for the language barrier. Of course, the gentleman here in Canada did not speak German, and the German brother and sister hardly spoke any English, so we were able to help with some translation, but not even a month later, they were visiting Canada to come and see their older brother. So that's another great story I like to share. Before I show this, I just want to mention one more file, because one more case example, because it's again another one that I like to share, but that I don't have on the slide. Because it does have to do with child protection. So if most of you are working in that aspect, it's very important for you to know that we can also do this. So it was a file that came to me from British Columbia. It was a worker completing a life book for a child that was aging out. He was coming out of care. And she said, Sylvia, I'm doing the book, and there's a whole blank page for the paternal side of the family. And she says, I think it's kind of sad. I don't want to leave him with his book like that. I'd like to put something. And she said, the only information we have is Dad's name, his date of death, and so if I can get something, a newspaper clipping or his death certificate or whatever you can get me from India would be amazing. And I said, that sounds like a good challenge and very, very nice of you to be doing that. So contacted India with the information we were provided, and about 2 weeks later it actually came back that the father was not deceased at all. He was actually alive. And so I had to go back to the social worker and say, so won't be able to get you the death certificate because, he's not deceased. And she was because all through the youth being in care, they had never thought of looking for the father because they had been told by the mom, he's deceased, and he died she had a whole story. He had died in a motorcycle accident and this and that. So everybody was under the impression he had passed away. So what do you do next? And so interestingly enough, the worker just said, no, we need to go for it, and if your colleague in India can go and meet him, we need this. And so my colleague in India went back and made an appointment, and it was 9 a.m, and she showed up at his door and introduced herself, and he said, I know why you're here. And he had a picture in his hand, and he opened his hand, and he said, you're here about him, my son in Canada. And she said yes, because she had also, she had introduced herself that she was doing international work and so on. And so she was able to sit down with him and find out a little bit more about him. But the story was that a long time ago he knew he had a son, but he was a self-confessed alcoholic. He actually, told the workers as such, so it's not us putting words in it, putting a story to it. He actually said, I drink every day, all day. This is all I do. I can't be a father. So that gave us sort of the story behind why the bio mom had made up this story. She possibly had preferred to say that there was no father to a father being unable to be a father because of alcoholism. So the father made sure that the worker wrote in her report, tell him I love him. So we were able to put that in the life book as, a story that it must have been very difficult for this young man to find out the story afterwards. But I always like to say this was sort of a silver lining. We can't provide this youth with a father at this point, but we were able to say at least he's not deceased, and maybe further down the line communication could have been possible. So Fred will be very happy. I made it in 47 minutes, so I think I did good. So the last slide is all about how to reach us for referrals or consultations. It's free to discuss any type of case. Some cases don't even have to be open with ISS Canada. We can put you in link with other resources, give you ideas of how to proceed, but you're always welcome to call us with cases and we can brainstorm.
Well, thank you very much, Sylvie. And yes, I am very happy because you've left about 15 minutes for questions and answers. And I can tell you from CSW's perspective, we very value the work of ISS Canada. Sylvie can attest that at least once or twice a month I send her a referral or question that I get at our desk here, an international question in which that we don't have the resources to answer the question, but ISS Canada always takes it on for us, and we're fully appreciative of that. So we have a number of questions already on the line, and I'm just going to begin with one that I had predetermined because I want to cover it, and then we'll head into the questions that people have typed in. If you have a question, now is the time to type it in. We have about 15 minutes to get to it, about 13 minutes now to get to it, and I'll get through to as many as I can. If we don't get through them all, as Sylvia has said, the ISS Canada information is up on the last slide, so you'll be able to contact them at your convenience. So, as an individual social worker, can I approach ISS Canada myself for help, and how would the services be paid for? That's my first question.
Okay. So we're funded right now through our contracts that we have with some provinces in Canada, and we are a small NGO. So yes, individual social workers are welcome to contact us. However, there would be a fee. We can negotiate or talk about those when there is a referral, because different cases will incur different fees. It is the unfortunate part. We are working really hard on that hopefully we can cover everybody and not have the fees passed on to either individual social workers or the individuals themselves. But for now, we have to do process, and this is what it is. But like I said, that's police officer calling me. Unfortunately, I think I have a reputation out there. I hardly refuse a case. So if I can see that we can be of help, I will definitely try and assist whoever needs the international help that they might be able to get.
I guess a follow-up question with that is, how would I know if my organization or my province has an agreement with ISS?
Oh, it's really simple. So it's British Columbia. All the MCFDs are covered. Alberta is covered. Then all of Quebec, and 3 CASs in Ontario. So Toronto CAS, Toronto Catholic, and Peel. However, a lot of the agencies, like right now, we have about 7 cases going on with Saskatchewan because they know we exist. They want to refer cases to us. It's just a question that they don't have a contract. So we would take on these cases, after the right approval of your managers or directors or whoever you need permission from. But so there's no stopping. Like we do multiple cases a year from Northwest Territories, and a few a year for New Brunswick. So I mean, it's not that there's no contract that you can't access our services.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Now, the question from Shelley here. Does ISSC also become involved in situations where the child and family are in Canada, but one or more parent is being deported and the children are being kept in Canada? Example, breakup of a relationship where one parent does not have full status in Canada and the other does, or parents do not have status in Canada, but children are born here and don't have any status in the country to which the parents are being deported. Yeah. Do you want me to repeat that, or did you follow it along?
No, I've heard this. These are such difficult cases because your heart breaks because you want the family unit to remain together, but Immigration Canada sees other things, and the child protection, of course, is there to protect everybody, all the children that are in their care and jurisdiction. So these cases are very difficult, but yes, because every case will vary and every case will be so different, if there is any way that people see a role, of course we can either suggest that we work with the other country they're being deported to, if it's a safe country, of course. If the protection agency is not sure about what type of country they would be going to, this is when the IRC comes in. We can get you all the information about different regions of different countries that are possibly safe or unsafe and where they would be staying. We can also negotiate that if you're not sure about the parents, providing safe care to the children, where maybe you want to send the children to a kin. So again, getting those kin assessments, and if the kin assessments come back negative, because I can tell you sometimes they do, well then that gives the Child Protection Agency here in Canada the paperwork to say, well, we tried to send the children over to family members as per our mandate, because I know all the Child Protection Agencies in Canada work the same. However, this is the only family member we could find, and this is the negative home assessments, that we got back. So, I mean, we're also, again, it's the silver lining I was mentioning earlier. It's all about, all your due process. You have to put all of these things together, and sometimes it's not going to be the exact outcome that you would have wanted, but at least you have, the proof in your file that you tried everything possible to either reunify this family or send the child to a kin or anything like that. So sometimes it's not about the greatest outcome you would have wished for, but at least it's about you saying you did your best.
Perfect.
So I hope this answers the question. Yes, these cases all of them are going to be so different because depending on the country that we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
The family.
We got a few more questions, so I'm going to ask you to shorten your answers up quick. We have about 8 minutes left.
Sorry.
No, it's perfectly fine. You have a lot to cover. I work in a cancer center. I have clients who are dying, and they want to see their family members who are in another country. Client can't travel as they are too ill. Family members have experienced hurdles in getting a visa to come into Canada, or they may not have enough money to get to Canada. I think I know the answer for this, and I'm sure these are one of the ones that really are difficult for you to manage and pull through, but can ISS assist with that?
Well, this is touching on the immigration part. So this is when CIC would be your best bet for that in terms of, because now I know that they are giving out visas for those exact cases where there's a family reunification is not possible, but that you need assistance either to care for somebody who's elderly or the final visit. I don't know if the final visit counts, but
so just to bring you back, just the acronym, what do you say, CIC, what's that?
Oh, sorry, Canadian Immigration Canada. Canadian and Citizenship.
Canada Immigration Canada, CIC Canada has now the new change, I think, a couple of years ago, right?
Right, because it's because in this case it's not just about the human part, but it's about, to be honest, to let somebody in our country. I know you're saying I need to cut my answers, but as an example, a lot of people are saying, how do I get a family member to come and care for the children so that we don't have to put them into care? Well, that becomes, again, it's an immigration issue. So I had to remind the workers, why aren't we looking at this caregiver, but in him or her own country, his or her own country? So we have to turn and I know in this case we can't send the dying patient, and I'm very sorry for that, but it does become an immigration issue, and it has to do with our immigration laws.
Okay. And I think this may be a similar answer. Can you assist in reuniting Syrian refugees to the children not living in Syria? And I think maybe you might be able to answer that one. And then the other piece, I think, is immigration. Do you assist in sponsoring?
We for Syrian refugees right now, it's too hot, if I can say. Like, we don't have people on the ground right now in Syria because it's just still a very difficult country to work with. But we're seeing that down the line, if things calm down, and hopefully they will, we will be able to have boots on the ground, and we'll be able to do that reunification. But if the people are in refugee camps in another country, and if we do have boots on the ground, we can help with at least getting them reacquainted or finding out if they are there. But it is, again, a question of the resources. It's a question of knowing if they know exactly where they are and things like that. But again, it has to do with also the process of immigration. So we can do the human side of finding out where they are and locating them possibly through our contacts, but then we can't get involved in the immigration and the process.
Okay, thank you very much. And this one I'm not familiar with, but you may be, and it's the person's asking the Bring Winland Home campaign is a public and has been on the news several times. I was wondering if you heard of this public campaign in general. We're not inquiring in sense of any confidential matters, just asking in general.
I have not heard, but now you've piqued my curiosity, and I will go and read up on it. So I'm sorry.
I Googled it myself, and it appears to be a Dominican Republic, I think, piece. But yeah, you might as well Google it. Thank you for bringing it to Sylvie's attention. And with that, Sylvie, I know here at CSW we very much appreciate the work of ISS Canada and your dedication and things. I've learned a little bit myself on what you cover, and I've gotten educated today on things. Again, people, if you are looking to contact ISS Canada to utilize their services, hop to their website, contact Sylvie directly, and move forward from there. Again, the recording of this webcast will be uploaded to CSW's website tomorrow. For those who require it, confirmation of attendance is available now by clicking the yellow icon at the bottom right of your window. With that, another sincere thank you to Sylvie and to you, the audience, for asking any questions and your questions, and look forward to the next time we get to hear a little bit more of ISS Canada. Thank you very much, Sylvie.
Thank you, Fred.
Take care.